I come from, I have several works in global citizenship education. I'm lucky enough to afford to live just doing global citizenship education with many hats. What I bring today is that I work in the team in Portugal in the Higher School of Education of the Politecnico Institute of Viana do Castelo, and by invitation of CISP, I am the coordinator of the one part of the research that we are presenting this afternoon. And so, Mella.
Hi everyone, so I'm Mella Cusak and I am from Ireland, and I'm here representing a very small NGO called A Partnership with Africa. This is my third, I think we decided last night, DEAR-funded project that I've been involved with Jordana and Max and some of the other people in the room, but my role in this project is a little bit different. I am the lead coordinator on the curriculum mapping and the textbook auditing research. But actually we're like a double act. We work in partnership with each other a lot. So I think we can say that we will share the glory and also take shared responsibility for any mistakes. But La Salete is going to go first and present her work package, and then I will present the curriculum mapping. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Mella. So I'm starting to present, and Mella and I would like to highlight that we are presenting, but the work is not ours. So it's a collective work. It's a collective work based on the result of 9 national teams. And lots of them are here. The researchers are here. So thank you very much for your work. It's a pleasure that we could, work together and get to this moment together, and still we have lots to come, so prepare for the work package 3. So some words about the project. Everyone knows the project already. So it's a DEAR project. The countries that everyone is here from one of these countries. So the main goal is the strengthening formal education for sustainable development, and we have the specific 4 global challenges that we are working on. About research. Research is one of the activities of this project, and it is based, as I told you, in 9 national, regional research teams coordinated by Mella and I. And we are 8 countries, but we have 9 research teams. And why? Because Spain are represented by two teams, one from the north and central Spain, and we have also the south of Spain and Andalusia. So that's why we have 9 regional national teams, and we have also 9 reports, national reports, that I invite you to read. They are already in our web page. What we are presenting here is an overview of these 9 national reports that we have made. So what are the methods that we used? So desk research, so researching the documentation, the policy documentation that we have, and then of course mixing and checking the information with interviews, with focus groups at the national level. There was 3 work packages, like Mella was saying. The first one is devoted to policies, and that's why it's the one that I will be presenting, and Mella will be presenting some highlights of the curriculum mapping. And the third one, we are still starting now. So in the next multi-stakeholder event, we will be presenting also some findings about this. So I will focus a bit on some results of this research. So one of the things that we wanted to look for, it was the key concepts. This morning we heard a lot about key concepts and the difference and diversity, and I got a sentence from Carla that she said we should celebrate this diversity. So we saw that in our countries. So in 8 countries we could check that global citizenship education was there. Everyone is using, mostly because of the framing of the SDG 4.7 that really brought this morning. We have global education mostly in the eastern countries, because also of the influence of the North-South Center, the gene influence. So there is global education. There is development education in some countries, mostly Portugal, Spain and Ireland, for instance, because the sector came from the international cooperation field. That's why we're still using that wording. and education for sustainable development that is used, for instance, in Greece very strongly, and is starting also to spread, you know, like we heard this morning with Aravella, connecting the dots with the GCE everywhere. So the first, this thematic diversity is the first conclusion, but the second is that this is shaped by historical and political contexts, of course, but there is this conceptual convergence, what we spoke about this morning. What we want to achieve is nuanced, but a bit the same. So that's what brought us together, and that is what we want to highlight. And we know that it was said in the morning that we are in a political sensitive, you know, moment. So there is also this aware in the countries that we need to have a pragmatic approach in the countries and use the wording that is best for the country. You know, so it fits more sensitive in one wording, so to use one of another, looking for consensual concepts to allow us to do what we want to do, you know. I don't know if I can say this, but you know what I mean. So without not creating a lot of problems. Another question was the key actors, and the interesting is that the actors are very similar in all the countries. So of course, teachers are not there, but teachers are the ones, you know, doing the stuff in at least in formal education. That was what we were, you know, studying. So teachers are the core. So who is helping or not helping teachers? So we have the ministries. So foreign affairs and education. Some countries co-leading, in other countries just one is stronger than another, or just one is leading. But we have ministries. NGOs and civil society platforms are the actor. We know these. They work very, very, very strongly in these issues. Higher education institutions, and I know that we have guests also for this sector. Teacher education and research were very highlighted, actors from this field. And the international networks or organizations. Sometimes we are working in these organizations and we think, you know, are we really, you know, advocating for something? Yes, you are. Because there was said that, you know, Jean, Council of Europe, European Commission, UNESCO were mentioned in all the country reports as, you know, helping to make some pressure from the outside to the national countries. About policy frameworks, so there are countries with national strategies, so we can see that Czech Republic, Ireland, Italy, Portugal, Spain have national strategies on these issues. What is a good result to know this? We have also Greece that has used a different wording, this GCE, but has a strong education for sustainable development framework also, so it is very strong in the country. And there are other countries with other configurations that, you know, they are making proposals to go towards a national strategy, but they are in the way. So Bulgaria and Poland, so the main actors still the civil society most of the times. What we have found is that this is the ideal, you know, where we have interministerial coordination, institutionalized governance bodies, dedicated funding lines, and monitoring and evaluation mechanisms. This could be the, you know, the policy framework, the better one to embed this into the curriculum. So some country snapshots. So this is not, you can know more, you know, reading the country reports, but just, you know, in Bulgaria it's really important education sector. So we have this preschool, we have some legal basis for the global citizenship education, but still you are in the way to develop a stronger policy. We have Czech Republic where we have from the development sector a strong strategy, and also education and environment sectors that their strategies also converging into these embedding and reinforcing. We have Greece with this ESD, a robust architecture. So we have the sustainability coordinators, we have centers for education for sustainability all over the country. We have a program, Active Citizenship Actions, new program that is now into the curricula. So I'm just giving, I know that I want to give credit for all the countries, so bear with me for a while. So in Ireland we have a good example of a multi-stakeholder convergence convergence, working together, putting the policy into practice. So we have documents and bodies, coordination bodies working together. In Italy, there is a clear national compass, cross-curricular and multi-actor implementation. So there's a national strategy for global citizenship education. So now you are moving for assessment and all these kinds of things. In Poland, there is this memorandum of understanding, from the MFA and NGOs. That's still the basis of this, the work in this field. But there are grants. So there are some entry points for Poland to work in this field, but there are still some challenges. Portugal is another example of a good coordination, so from the development sector and the educational sector, so there are strategies together that really try to put GC into practice. And Spain, there are national, also robust documents, but there are also regional. So Spain is very different from the other countries in terms of regional importance, and so there are lots of regional instruments in terms of the educational sector, NGDO sector and development sector coming together differently in different regions. So I hope you are happy with this, some highlights that gives you, the willing to read the national reports. Giving the voice to the to the stakeholders. So now it comes from the focus group and the interviews. So giving the voice to the actors. So everyone thinks that they have better policies than practices. So this is really interesting. So we need to bridge also this gap. Sometimes we speak about research and policy, but there is also this gap between policies and practices. So there is this gap that everyone was aware of. So there is some questions there about the practices are really depending on teacher initiative or of leadership, the school directors, school boards, and I'm looking at one right now, a director of a school that is here with us. So it's really depending on the willing of these people. So we need to move for a more structured embedding of these issues. So there is this central role of teacher and leadership. There is also a territorial variation. So it depends of where the schools are, the resources, the leadership, the closing, if they are close or not to NGOs. That is, for instance, in Portugal, we can see that NGOs are in Lisbon. So in my city, if we want to work with NGOs, we don't have NGOs. So this is also very depending, this question is really an issue. And we know that NGOs don't have permanent funds. Usually they work on cycles of funding. So this is also something that injures the practices that we are facing. So main obstacles, conceptual challenges, these questions that we were speaking, terminological confusion, complexity, abstraction. So what are we speaking of? That's why Aravella was saying, what we want, we need to focus on that. And also this political sensitivity that we are facing right now. Then some structural challenges. So overcrowded curricula or perception from teachers of these overcrowded curricula, the policies that are fragmented, sometimes development and education don't speak, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't speak. This institutional instability, we said this in the morning, governments are changing a lot in our countries. So this political instability, we are always starting the conversation. Yeah, I don't know if you have this feeling, but we are always starting the conversation with new people. This weak cross-ministerial coordination and these monitoring and evaluation systems that are weak. Some practical challenges. So limited teacher preparation. We work with teacher education, and there is always this, how can I address, I'm a math teacher, how can I address gender issues, or migration, or inequality. So it's not easy for teachers to address these issues, so there is this limited teacher preparation. Resources, lack of resources and some age-appropriate resources for kindergarten, for instance, for primary school, the heavy workloads of teachers, and few career incentives also for this area. We feel that a lot. But there are opportunities. So there are things that are already in place so that we can use. So there are policies. There are policies in almost of our of the 8 countries. We have opportunities to embed, to use the policies we have, and so there are curriculum reforms. We see policies as legitimation. All the actors said that policies legitimate, so it's good also. We have these partnerships in some countries, and that is a good opportunity to make the most of this partnership, multi-stakeholder among different actors. We have already pedagogical approaches that are innovative in the countries. We can also use these entry points. We have teacher, trainer institutes, so we can approach them. So we have this structure that already in place, so we can engage school leaderships. We can use the digital platforms to also for resources. And we can use monitoring mechanisms that are existing. We can translate into our languages. There are lots of institutions, international institutions, publishing these ideas, thinking together, so we can use also a bit of this. I'm ending. So some recommendations, and it's good that Mel and I, we were saying in this morning that it seems that everyone at the panelists have read our report, because you said lots of things that are there, and of course the source it was our report, so we are sure of that. So the recommendations are, what we heard this morning is nothing totally new, but what we want. So what we choose this motto together. It was this moving from individual enthusiasm that we have into the enthusiastic persons in our countries, to this systematic integration. So recommendations, the main recommendation, and this is, remember, a sum up of the 9 reports, but everyone was here. So clarify and align the concepts. That was really important. This morning we heard this very clear. It doesn't mind what we are using in terms of wording. Be smart when using the words. If I'm speaking to teachers, I use citizenship and development because it's the subject in Portugal. If I speak to Latin America, I will use world citizenship, not global, because my actors use. In Portugal is development education. You know what I mean? So I used 5 different terms in my life, in my daily life, because I work with different actors. So that is the question. Important is what we mean by that. And that we need to build with our actors, to appropriation of what we mean with this. So always start with your actors about defining what we mean with that concept. That is the important thing. Institutionalize partnerships and multi-actor collaboration. That is really, really, really important. Is part of this ideal that I showed before, this multi-stakeholder collaboration at the national level. Strengthening the curriculum integration, of course. Promote teacher education, promote research about this, adopt the whole school approaches, and now I have learned this morning whole societal approaches, whole society approaches, so use these. Produce and facilitate the access to resources, develop monitoring and evaluation systems, and establish funding that is a bit long-lasting and not just, short-cycled. So these were the main findings of the work package 1. You can see a synthesis also in that poster, and you can read the 9 reports plus the synthetic one that is available in our website. Thank you very much, and then I pass to Mella.
Just the same starting point, really, with the curriculum mapping research. We worked with a lot of the same people in the teams across the different pieces of research, which actually has been very helpful because there is connections between the research. And although the curriculum mapping research isn't final, we haven't yet produced a synthesis report. The stage that we are at is that all of the 9 regions and countries have produced their reports, and then the posters, the country posters that you can see around the room, are based on the curriculum case studies, and we'll have a chance to engage a little bit better with those in the poster session later on in the conference. So the purpose of the curriculum mapping research was around identifying opportunities for teaching, learning and assessment with reference to the 4 global challenges in the project. So climate change, migration, gender equality and international equalities. And we would have worked with the team, presented them with a draft structure for the report, the teams across the different countries, and agreed that structure because it was important that obviously the structures of the reports work in each of the contexts, and the jurisdictions are quite different in a lot of ways. But you can see the kind of structure of the national reports there on the bottom of the slide. And the focus today, the main thing that I'm going to talk about is the curriculum case studies, and that's the focus of the posters around the room as well. So what we were asking people to do, the GET project focuses on interventions for students between the ages of 11 and 16. So what we were asking people to do was to look at their curriculum documentation. We hoped they would all do history, geography, and if they had a citizenship or a civic education subject, that they would be the 3 case studies. There were some exceptions to that rule because we wanted the researchers to pick the subjects where they thought there was the most possibility for global citizenship education, and because that's obviously where you're going to target your intervention. So there are some exceptions, but for the most part, the different national reports actually do focus on those 3, history, geography, and citizenship or civic education. And within the project, there are a set of learning outcomes for each of the 4 global challenges. Now there's 7 for each of the, so if you think about it, 7 learning outcomes for each of the 4 global challenges. I'm not going to show you all the learning outcomes, but there are quite a bit of similarity across the different sets of learning outcomes. So what we were asking people to do was to look at those learning outcomes and find opportunities or find evidence or emphasis of those learning outcomes in their curriculum documentation. Okay? I hope that's clear, because otherwise nothing else is going to be. So the curriculum case studies, they started by giving us a profile of their subject. So a profile of history, a profile of geography, a profile of citizenship education. And within that, some information about anything that was in the aim, the curriculum aim that links to global citizenship education, things that maybe were reflecting good practice around active citizenship education methodologies and how they are assessed through those different subjects in the different contexts. And as I said, the learning outcomes, the commonality across them is that you've got a learning outcome that's looking at definitions and concepts. So, for example, in relation to gender, relation to climate and so on. A learning outcome that focuses on root causes and interconnections. One that is about governance. One that's about respect. The respect for all natural beings, for example, when it comes to the climate change learning outcome. One that asks students to look at a range of values and beliefs with reference to the specific global challenge, a learning outcome around looking at the effectiveness of individual and collective action relative to each of the global challenges, and then one that's really focused on the student and the student's skills of participation and engagement. This is what an extract from our mapping tool looked like, and it is probably as it looks. It's quite hard work actually to fill this out. I mean, there are some of you in the audience that actually had the joy of filling out this tool. I was one of those people too, by the way, from the Irish context, and it is long and hard work actually. So if you can see on the left-hand column, you've got one of our first project learning outcome. This is an extract from the climate change table. So that's the first learning outcome there. And what we were asking people to do was look for evidence and emphasis within the curriculum documentation. So they would either find no evidence, limited evidence, moderate evidence, or substantial evidence, okay? And they were asked to populate with examples. So they came up with a kind of a rating based on what they were seeing in their curriculum documentation, and they were asked to come up with a rating. And then they all sent their lovely reports to me, and I had the pleasure through last summer of reading through them all, and I tried to make sure, insofar as is possible, that the interpretation of the tool was somewhat aligned across the different jurisdictions. But this is a limitation of the research, if you like. It can be quite a subjective exercise, and I'm relying on translated evidence as well, which adds another kind of level of complication into it, because I do not have the same linguistic abilities as some of my colleagues, so it all came to me in English. So I've taken the rating information and I've generated some graphs. Now I've focused on the average ratings across all of the subjects and in all of the countries. Okay, so that's 27 subjects and 9 different regions or countries, if you like. So what you can see there is that, and again, this is an average across all of those learning outcomes, all the subjects and all the countries. Okay, so don't despair, is what I'm saying to you here. But they're all still falling in the limited evidence or emphasis range. Okay, climate is, and this reflects something that was said this morning. Climate is doing better. Okay, international inequality is not that far off. Migration is next, and gender is down here. Okay? But that's a very kind of a helicopter view of the data, because once you drill down into it, it becomes a little bit more interesting. So I guess that's why I'm saying don't despair. And I thought, given that we were in Sofia and there might be more Bulgarians in the audience than any other nationality, that it was only fair if we maybe look at Bulgaria. Now, I did check with our Bulgarian researcher just before to make sure that she was okay with this. So Bulgaria submitted 3 case studies. We had citizenship, education, geography, and history and civilizations. And if you look, again, this is the average across the 3 subjects. If you look at this, it's falling below the average across all countries and all subjects for, I just want to make sure I get this right, for climate and gender. So that's lower than the average across all of the other countries. But it's actually coming out very well when it comes to international inequalities and migration. And Eva is here in the audience, and she was saying that that's because it's the curriculum is very focused on content. So that's bringing that average up for those particular themes. And that's really interesting, actually, because you can see that once you drill down into the data relative to each of the learning outcomes. And in particular, the geography curriculum in Bulgaria is very, very strong compared to the average across all countries, any of the countries that submitted a geography case study. Bulgaria is, I don't like using the word scoring, but it's scoring or rating itself higher on international inequalities and migration than the other geography case studies. I am aware that this is a lot of text. I spent a lot of time trying to delete words to make it a little bit more friendly to look at. These are kind of summaries. It's not the full text of the different GET climate change learning outcomes. That's in the your left-hand column there. And you can see the ratings across all countries, all subjects is in the middle column. I'm going to come to this column in a second. So only the first one is coming in as moderate emphasis or evidence, and that's the learning outcome that looks at root causes and consequences. I'm happy with that, because I think that's been something that curriculum documents have probably it's improved over time. Like, there has been a kind of tendency to always look at consequence and not at root causes, so this gives me a little bit of hope. And then if we go right down to the end of the table there, you can see that looking at the effectiveness of individual and collective action is getting the least average rating across. And I'll come back to the way, across all subjects in all countries, how those learning outcomes have been rated in general in a few slides. But again, to try and give you a little bit of hope, on this column here on the right-hand side, what you're seeing is countries where the researchers have rated their curriculum documentation as having significant emphasis or evidence. And if we go right back to the top again, even though the average rating is moderate, you've got 6 countries with multiple curriculum documents that are falling into the significant range. So that's really hopeful. And even down at the bottom, you've got 4 different case studies that are rating themselves as, where the researchers are rating the document as being having significant emphasis and evidence. So it's not, I guess what I'm trying to say is it's not all bad news. I picked just to focus today on climate and gender because they're at either end of the spectrum in terms of where we're seeing the most evidence and where we're seeing the least evidence across the different countries. This is the table, the equivalent table for gender. So again, root causes is quite high up in terms of, it's high up the table. I don't mean the rating is particularly high, the average rating, because it's all in the limited, and some is below even. And you'll see that there's much less reporting of significant emphasis and evidence in this column here on the right. And it seems to be that where there is evidence and emphasis, it's coming through in the civics or the citizenship education case studies. A little bit in history, but it tends to be in the civics or the citizenship space. So that's kind of interesting as well. If you look across all of the data at where the ratings are landing relative to the learning outcomes that the project has devised, your root causes is getting the most emphasis. So regardless of your global issue or your global challenge, root causes and interconnections, followed by definitions and concepts, followed by respect, and then you've got a grouping where they're all the same, which is about looking at the interactions between global, national and local governance, the range of values and beliefs relative to the particular global issue, and then the students' own skills for active engagement. They're kind of coming in as a cluster. And then the last one is looking at other people's actions, whether or not they're individual or collective. So I suppose this gives us less cause for hope, because you're seeing some of the things that have come up in the conversation today as being most important when it comes to global citizenship education, that idea of, what are we about? We're trying to actually support young people to become active citizens. We're not doing that very well if you go on the basis of the data that we're receiving through the research teams, because that's where the least emphasis is across all of the global issues. It's on the actual experiential, skills around participation and engagement, and looking at models and examples of other people's actions with reference to the global issues. I do not want to leave without saying that nuance and jurisdictional differences really matter in all of this, because I have focused on kind of the averages across, and that's not actually a fair representation of some of the really good practice that's happening in the different countries and the different subjects. So I've just picked citizenship education or civics education as an example here. So out of the 9 countries or regions that submitted a civics or a citizenship education case study, 7 out of the 9 submitted that. So we have quite a lot of them there. But you can see from the table, well, I hope you can see it. I'm just realising blue probably wasn't the best background colour. There's a lot of difference between the jurisdictions about how civics education or citizenship education is organised. So in some countries it's a discrete, standalone subject, and in other countries it's thematic or cross-curricular. Sometimes it'll have a time duration, like a compulsory or mandatory time allocated to it, even if it's thematic. It has to if it's discrete and standalone. But the time allocations differ across countries as well. So when I show you the averages, that includes countries, where you might have 50 hours for citizenship education, and it includes country, you know, across a number of years, and it includes countries where you might have 300 hours. So you have to actually keep all of that in your mind as well. It's kind of a blunt instrument. And then, because there was choice within the research teams, and you've got that age range in the project of 11 to 16, some of the researchers were choosing to submit case studies that may be focused on 1 year, you know, one age, like 11 to 12 or 14 to 15, and the curriculum document for that 1 year, and others were doing a case study on a curriculum document that might span multiple years. So you do also have to keep all of that in mind when you think about the research data. Again, it's one of the limitations. So some of the kind of key points that are emerging through the national reports, and that you will obviously see reflected in the synthesis report, are that you know, we've 27 curriculum case studies. We've three from each country, but 3 isn't enough. So we need the big picture. I don't want you to send me more national reports, by the way. but as people that are working in this area, if we want to actually have effective interventions, so whether it's teacher capacity building, whether it's supporting school leaders, producing curriculum resources, influencing curriculum reform, then we need to understand the landscape that we're working in and what it is that we're actually trying to change, because otherwise we're fooling ourselves. You know, you need to know your curriculum documentation. I mean, I'll give you an example from the Irish context. So in our citizenship education subject, which is compulsory and it's at lower secondary, it's for all students, there's 100 hours across 3 years. Gender is evident, but it's not very strong. And that makes the picture look not so good where gender is concerned. But we have another compulsory course for the same cohort that's also for 100 years that has a lot of gender in there, but it wasn't included as a case study. So you in order to be effective in your interventions, you need to have the bigger picture. And I would say not only the bigger picture when it comes to curriculum, but also the bigger picture in terms of how schools work and who the actors are in the education system, and where, you know, a particular unit in your Ministry of Education, where their role starts and stops and where another unit's role picks up. Because unless we have that information, we can't actually be effective and use our limited resources to the best effect. So in a sense, like we are global citizenship, but we're also global citizenship education, so we have to know both, and we're straddling both systems. The other thing that's clear from the national reports is that, at least from the research teams, there is a very different view about what constitutes an ideal curriculum document. So on the one hand, you have people that would say it needs to spell out in detail what content needs to be covered. And obviously, the people that we're dealing with would like to see lots of detail around migration, gender, blah, blah. And then you have other people that say, no, what we need to do is actually pull back and advocate for curriculum documents that are very broad and allow for all of these things. But they're only documents, and unless lots of things fall into place behind them, then it becomes you've got that policy practice gap that Salete talked about, you know, so that's where all of those interventions become really important. I think actually there's pros and cons to both approaches, you know, the very specific curriculum document and the very broad curriculum document. But you need to be clear about what those pros and cons are when you're planning, particularly if you're advocating for curriculum change. So be clear about what it is that you want. You can see the activist coming out in me here now as well. So another of the kind of key things that are emerging is we need to take a better look at our own learning outcomes that we have produced for this project. There are a lot of learning outcomes. Depending on our view of what an ideal curriculum would look like, do we go with refining what we have or limiting what we have? You know, there's a conversation to be had there. And also, there was lots of very interesting suggestions around revising them and adding to the kind of notes and supports and explanations that go with the learning outcomes. And no doubt that will be a conversation that we will be having for the remainder of the project. I'm going to come back to policy practice gap. I'm nearly finished. Relax. So I was interested this morning, somebody said about moving towards schools that are more decentralised, but actually in the research from some of the countries, what was coming back was that when you have a school system or regions that are basically been told adapt what's produced at a national level, that actually that presents a picture of that gap between curriculum policy and practice, because they've been told to adapt it. And so then it looks like things aren't happening the way they're supposed to happen if you're monitoring from a national level, but that's kind of contradictory, isn't it? You're telling them to adapt, but then you're monitoring them based on what's actually there at a national level. So again, something to think about. Also, particularly when it comes to civics or citizenship education, where there's a thematic or a cross-curricular approach, that presents real issues, because we're often expecting teachers who don't have the capacity to do something. It's probably more of an issue in those contexts than when citizenship education is a standalone subject. It's still an issue there, but it's even more of an issue maybe where it's cross-curricular. And then the other thing that's come through in some of the reports is that even when opportunities, for example, in relation to gender or migration, are possible because of a wording in a curriculum document, teachers' willingness to interpret the curriculum documentation to allow them to teach and assess where those global themes are concerned, there's a chilling effect because of societal attitudes to gender, or perceived societal attitudes to gender, or a perception that there might be a backlash from school management or parents, or even in the classroom, where it might become a sensitive or emotive issue that they then will have to deal with. So that's not surprising either, but also interesting to see it coming out. So we need to, address the gap, capacity building for teachers. I'll focus in on that because it's come up a few times, this idea of teacher capacity to address sensitive and emotive. I don't really like the word controversial. I prefer sensitive and emotive, back to definitions again, issues. And then I think that one thing that we haven't done very well in global citizenship education across the board is think about assessment, actually. And teachers are very focused on assessment, so why are we not focused on assessment? And if we might even disagree with the way assessment happens, but unless we kind of become advocates for something better or ways of doing what has to be done in an improved kind of manner, then we're maybe missing an opportunity there as well. And then obviously our resources that we produce within this project and beyond need to be context specific. And so if citizenship education is interdisciplinary or cross-curricular or thematic in your system, then your resources should also be. Because we have to support teachers, not ask them for favours. And the last thing, this is my last one, is that actually I think people, despite the fact that it's really painful, and I'm sure they'd rather pull out their fingernails than go through the exercise again, there's a real value in engaging in this curriculum mapping, regardless of where you are at in your curriculum. So whether it's just changed, it's about to change, you want it to change, whether you're producing resources or you want to engage in teacher capacity building, knowing your curriculum is really, really important. And some of the research teams have kind of highlighted that the mapping tool could be used to inform policymakers. It could be used with school leaders to help them understand how relevant global citizenship education is right across their curriculum programs. And there's also, which I think is an interesting one, a suggestion that a very small version of the mapping activity could be done as part of teacher training, as a way of helping teachers to understand where the links are into their own curriculum. So, and there's lots of interesting ideas about new, more resources, curriculum resources coming through as well. So I just will end there, but just again to reiterate what La Salete said, just thanks to the 9 research teams, because we wouldn't be here if they hadn't been there, and we need to keep you on side because you're not finished yet.